Oh, hamburger patty. Lilo, stop growling. Unless you're a real beefaholic. This is so out of order right now. I'm getting a phone call. Okay, this is actually perfect timing. At this point, it is essentially impossible to have an honest conversation about environmentalism without bringing up meat. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's gotta be had. So let's dive in. Hey everyone, thank you for watching. You found my channel, Small Steps Towards Making a Difference. I'm Megan, and I'm a licensed biology and environmental science teacher. People tend to throw a lot of shade at vegetarians and vegans for being self-righteous or whatever, and liking to talk about why not eating meat is so important, but I hate having these conversations. I'm a vegetarian. Honestly, yeah, I used to like having these conversations because it's something that I found interesting, the environmental impact of eating meat. However, I haven't liked having these conversations for a long time. Shocker, but you don't like to talk about the thing that you get made fun of for in life. It's just kind of what happens. But this is still an important conversation to have, especially on this type of platform. Time for a disclaimer. Yes, I consider myself a vegetarian for simplicity's sake. I also like to dabble in a lot of vegan products as well. However, I eat shrimp and crab. I also occasionally eat regular meat. I have turkey, I'd say 4 times a year I have turkey, and then chicken maybe once a month. Also, I've never liked red meat. Since I was 5 years old, I hated red meat. I actually one time thought I had a crush on the cartoon version of the Hamburglar. One time, I can vividly remember, it was with my grandparents and my cousins, and I was like, I love the Hamburglar so much, I'm gonna eat hamburgers, even though I hate them. And I did it. And then there was like another time in high school where I was trying to impress this boy, so I think I ate a hamburger. But other than that, no. Only 2 boys have ever made me eat a hamburger in my life, and one was a fictional cartoon. So I hate red meat is the gist. So what I'm saying is it was a lot easier for me to not eat meat than maybe some of you hardcore carnivores out there. I also want to say that any reason that somebody chooses not to eat meat is valid and important. Valid and equally important. I became a vegetarian for the environmental impact of meat. I was also affected by the mistreatment of animals. That wasn't my main reason though. But any reason you choose to be a vegetarian or a vegan, whether it's for your health or it is for the concern of animals or it's for the environmental impact, they're all equally valid. So I wanted to just make that clear. Now I want to give you a really important recommendation at this point. Consider watching a documentary made in 2014 called Cowspiracy. It is on Netflix. It was actually really dangerous for the creators to create. They actually had to kind of risk their lives to create this movie, and you'll know why when you watch the movie. But Leonardo DiCaprio picked it up, watched it, thought it was amazing, and wanted it to be viewable by the public. So he really took it and launched it on Netflix. Check it out, it's still on Netflix. Great movie. It's called Cowspiracy, like conspiracy but with cows. I'll also put a link to the movie's website in the description of this video so that you can, if you don't have time to watch the movie, you can breeze through some of the facts and figures from the film and see where those facts and figures come from. It was made a while ago, and like I said, it's 2014, so I'm not actually going to cite the facts and figures in this video. Instead, I'm going to focus on what I consider to be the best of the best in terms of climate research statistics, and that is the IPCC reports. Now, if you don't know what the IPCC is, it's really important that you do. So the United Nations has an environmental program, and within this environmental program, they have the IPCC. The IPCC is made up of hundreds of scientists from throughout the world who do research on climate change. And it stands for the International Panel on Climate Change. Like I said, it's under the United Nations, so one of the reasons why I consider this to be the most legit source is because it's not coming from any particular country, and it's the most devoid of special interests. The other thing about the IPCC that I really appreciate is that they've never tried to jump to conclusions too soon. So climate change has been a well-known problem for quite a while, and it's been a problem that was known to scientists since the 1960s at least. So it's been around for a while. But the IPCC reports, they've never tried to jump to conclusions about it. It took them a long time time to come out with the conclusion that climate change was human-caused, which they have now said, but again, it took them a long time to do that. They didn't say that right away, even though that's where the evidence was pointing. They took time to collect all of the evidence to unequivocally, which means undeniably, state that climate change is human-caused. And the IPCC, they actually release reports on climate change every few years. They release another annual report, which is so long and so huge, but they come out with the new data on climate change. So it's an ongoing process, definitely where you want to go to for your climate change statistics if you have time to read. Okay, I'm going to read a short quote to you from the IPCC 2020 report. Lifestyle changes are a prerequisite for sustaining reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and for bridging the emissions gap. Around 2/3 of global emissions are linked to the private household activities according to consumption-based accounting. Reducing emissions through lifestyle changes requires changing both broader systemic conditions and individual actions. In terms of food, shifting consumption towards low-carbon diets has strong emissions reductions potential. Moving to a vegetarian diet, for example, could reduce emissions by an average of 0.4 tons of CO2 equivalents per capita per year, while for a vegan, it is 0.9 tons of CO2 equivalents per capita per year. What this means is that you individually, if you are a vegetarian, can prevent half a ton of CO2 from entering the atmosphere every single year. And if you are a vegan, you double that impact. This also acknowledges that there are significant changes that can be made on the consumer level. However, they do acknowledge this. Historically, sustainable transitions have not been strongly driven by voluntary consumer choices, but by factors such as social norms and by changing the options available to consumers. The factory farming industry is directly tied to our government. You're not going to hear a politician coming forward and saying that we should dramatically lower our meat consumption anytime soon. If you don't believe me, get this. The US government spends $38 billion each year to subsidize the meat and dairy industry, but only 0.04% of this to subsidize vegetables and fruits. A $5 Big Mac would cost $13 if the retail price included the expenses that the meat industry offloads onto society. This is bonkers to me, let alone the fact that we eat way too much meat in the US than is healthy for us to eat. If that fact and others I've shared make you sad because, well, you love meat, you're not alone. It is part of the American way. And I have another recommendation for you if you feel this way. There is an episode called, I think it's just called Burgers, on the podcast Armchair Expert that goes into our history as burger lovers and meat lovers in America. And I think you'll find it pretty interesting. There's a lot of conflicting info when it comes to looking at the effect of animal agriculture on the environment, sadly. But one thing you'll find if you look a little bit is that many estimates say that agriculture is actually a bigger contributor to climate change than all of the transportation sector combined. Yes, you heard me right. Some estimates say that agriculture leads to more greenhouse gas emissions than all of transportation combined. And if you know anything about air travel, airplanes release a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Another thing to note is that meat consumption tends to correlate with income. In Indonesia, per capita, meaning per person, meat consumption is about 14 kilograms per year. In Finland, it is 80 kilograms per year. And in the United States, it's a whopping 119 kilograms per year on average per person. Plant-based proteins such as beans, peas, and lentils can meet nutritional needs of most healthy adults with a far smaller carbon footprint. In addition, the enormous amount of food wasted has a huge environmental footprint and needs to be addressed. The following recommendations are focused on shifting to plant-rich diets and reducing food waste. And I want to stress these are from the United Nations for the entire world, if possible. And I just chose a few of these recommendations. There are a lot more. Subsidize farmers to switch from animal to vegetable farming. Increase the number, variety, appearance, and quality of plant-rich dishes on menus in schools, institutional, and business cafeterias. Regulate advertising on selected high-carbon foods such as meat, certain types of fish, and dairy products. Introduce regular sustainable food campaigns, for example, Meat-Free Day, and make them increasingly frequent. Reflect environment and health impacts of animal products in school curricula and training programs for professionals in the food and hospitality industry. That's my favorite one as a teacher. Remove subsidies on and other incentives for production and consumption of animal-based products. Run campaigns on food as a right and awareness of unfair impacts of high consumption of animal-based products. So that's getting into equity issues. But here's the thing, even though these are recommendations literally for the entire world created by the organization whose goal is to help the people of the world, I had to dig to find these things. A stat from the IPCC's 2022 report that I find especially disheartening is that our food systems are responsible for approximately 80% of biodiversity loss. 80%! Unfortunately, we won't even get into talking about the cruelty of factory farming on animals in this video, but it's just as, if not more important, if you ask me. But maybe that's my biocentrism showing. We also need to acknowledge that factory farming and commercialized agriculture puts the most vulnerable, economically and politically disadvantaged people in the worst position. Again, I wish I could get into this more, but we're gonna have to save it for another video. One more thing to note is that not only is there a ubiquitous market of meat alternatives, but there's also the lab-grown meat industry. It's pretty expensive, so it's not commercially available yet, but there is a lot of information about it online, and you can donate to it now if you want to donate to the research effort. So I will put a link to donate in the description and for you to get more information on this technology. Before we get to the task for today, I want to show you a few graphics from Our World in Data that illustrate just a few of the biggest problems with animal agriculture. Thank you, Our World in Data, for making your data free and available to look at. If you look at this graph of greenhouse gas emissions, we can see that beef has by far the most. 60 kilograms of CO2 for every kilogram of beef that you consume. Think about that. I always think of kilograms like a bag of peanuts. Wasn't that the thing they told us as a kid to think about, like a bag of peanuts? Whatever amount of meat you are eating, you are producing 60 times as much CO2. You can see that these greenhouse gas emissions, if you're not sure where this comes from, you can see that the majority come from farm. There's also land use change, so changing the land to farmland, cutting down trees, animal feed, and some other categories as well. By far the biggest is the actual greenhouse gas emissions on the farm. And the next one is lamb, but that doesn't even come close. We're talking 24 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of product compared to 60. So well under half, and then cheese is about a third. If we compare that 60 kilograms of CO2 to nuts, which we only see 0.3, and nuts actually have a negative land use change, so that's good. It's just not even comparable. It's not even comparable in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm sure people will tell you, well, nuts, almonds take a lot of water to grow, and they do take a lot of water. It's a real issue, but if we look at these greenhouse gas emissions, it's not even comparable. Land use per 100 grams of protein, and again we see the biggest issues are with lamb and beef. Beef, lamb, and cheese tend to be your top three, but beef is usually by far and away the worst, and lamb is up there too. If you do love meat, a positive about this is look at poultry. Poultry is way down there, and fish way down there, so that's great. Okay, I mentioned that water was a factor too. So this is fresh water withdrawals per kilogram of food product. I want to be really transparent. There are concerning things with cheese and nuts and fish as well because we are running out of water. We're running out of fresh water. The use of land for food production in general. So of all of the habitable land on Earth, 50% is taken up by agriculture. And 77% of that is for livestock. So 50% of all of the habitable land on Earth is taken up by agriculture. Just think about that. And 77% of that is for meat and dairy products alone. This is from 2017, so it's a little bit older, but this is the average total meat supply per person measured in kilograms per year. And as you can see, the biggest offenders are not all that surprising. We've got the US and we've got Australia and New Zealand. They have more meat per person than anywhere else in the world. That's so much meat. And this estimate's actually higher than the other one I gave you. In the US, this actually says 124.1 kilograms per year. And unfortunately, we still have more than Australia and New Zealand. Australia is 121.6 kilograms per year. New Zealand is 100.89. Okay, here are your options for your task today. Number 1, choose a high carbon meat product such as beef or lamb to either cut out entirely or cut out for a trial period. A good length for a trial period period should be at least a month. If that all does seem too challenging though, your second option is to go meatless for one day of the week. I like Monday because it's at the beginning of the week, and if you have a slip up, you can change it to a day that's later in the week for just that week. And meatless Monday sounds good together. Or your third option is to watch Cowspiracy on Netflix. Alright, that's all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have time to like, subscribe, and or comment, it would mean a lot. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you later.